Most motorcycle companies have a cool origin story that accompanies their founding. Some of the very oldest motorcycle brands, like Enfield and Triumph, came into being when a bicycle company added an internal combustion engine to one of their respective frames. Ducati came into existence when the three Ducati brothers and their father, radio component manufacturers, decided to focus on making internal combustion engines in post-war Italy. And about the same time in post-war Japan, Suzuki, which had started off life as a loom-making company, found itself building practical, affordable transportation to help people get around. Cake, the company behind a range of ultra-practical, all-electric two-wheelers, was founded by someone who described himself as a, quote, motorcycling hater. Yet every one of Cake's offerings, from the Ossa through to the Calque, have managed to fill a unique space in the marketplace that few other companies have. Motorcycles that won't break the bank, are easy as a bicycle to ride, torquey enough to perform incredible off-road stunts, robust and quiet enough to chase down poachers on game reserves in South Africa, and strong enough to be delivery vehicles in big cities. And today, we're lucky enough to be able to chat with the person behind Cake's extraordinary lineup, founder and CEO Stefan Ytterborn. Stefan, thanks for joining us. Cake offers a unique mix of rides for an equally unique mix of jobs. Perhaps you can start by telling us about how Cake got to where it has today.
Well, it's a very random story actually. Describing myself as a non-motorcyclist and at times being a hater because it's noisy and it's disturbing. That's my past. I've always been into product development professionally. I've always been into sports somehow, not at least through my different initiatives on the entrepreneurial side. And what happened was that while attending a show in Munich, the ISPO show, which is a big European sports show on an annual basis, I ran into an electric motorbike for the first time, and it kind of shouted at me like, "Get me, try me, ride me." And I got the bike, and the exciting aspect was all about being able to get out there and explore in the backcountry without disturbing or polluting. And a few summers later, and this is maybe 8 or 9 years ago, I ended up with nearly 10 or potentially even more bikes at a really early stage when it comes to electric motorbikes at this time, in history. Totally crazy about the being able to fly in the woods, again silently and without polluting, and it was a pure kind of passion on my side long before I started thinking whether I should actually start a business or not. So again, I somehow this kind of the formula of excitement and the connection to sustainability without polluting or disturbing kind of caught me with the fun side of it initially.
That's interesting that you're talking about it initially from the fun side, because one of the things I think about when I think about Cake is this really interesting division between bikes which exist to be fun. Like, I've seen fabulous videos of people doing off-road stunts and motocross things on Cake bikes in near complete silence, which is so cool. But then also like this real emphasis on practicality with, last mile delivery stuff and the anti-poaching bikes and things like that. How did you transition from the focus on fun to adding in this element or oriented around work?
So this might be a bit of a long story, but generally what happened is that, throughout my career, having developed products, it wasn't, long until I started trying to come up with alternative ideas on how to optimize the relation between the chassis and the drivetrain. While the majority of players out there were simply just, swapping the combustion engine drivetrain with an electric, everything else the same, with the consequence of needing to put on tons of battery cells. On my side, I was, if I would build super light, I would be able to reduce the number of battery cells needed and still, drive performance. So that was one of the things that kind of got me going. The other aspect is more of a business-related reason, I would say. The more I got into this, I'd say a combination between the business opportunity and the purpose of bringing something that has a meaning to it. And if I jump a bit, to the stage we're in right now, I'd say that our take on sustainability is that the biggest threat is not whether it's 100% clean itself, it's our pace of consumption in general in society. We buy low quality stuff that ends up in garbage before we know it. So our kind of core messages or obligation, I would say, is extend life cycles. And that is built on 4 pillars on our side, which is purpose, innovation, performance, and physical quality. So in that sense, it makes sense to actually start this journey by developing bikes that withstands jumping 30 yards or doing double flips or whatever it might be, because we learn a lot from that. We secure a lot of competence and understanding in terms of material, making, construction, maintenance and use of the bikes that we later can implement into what is booming now, which is basically, two-wheelers, electric motorized two-wheelers that will serve for much cleaner and more efficient transportation needs in urban situations down the road. So everything has a certain order that promotes the general ambition of ours in terms of developing this business. And again, it's a combination between, I'd say, excitement, responsibility, and relevancy. And from the start, we knew that the backcountry off-road bikes would only stand for a minimal chunk of our total kind of revenues and sales, because where we can truly make a difference is in large numbers with bikes to replace a number of transportation, I'd say, habits, using four-wheeled vehicles in urban situations that pollute, congestion consequences are severe and so forth. So it kind of has a connection between why we start off with those utility or hardcore performance bikes as we, to support or lubricate our relevance in terms of bringing the everyday bikes, the everyday commuter bike or the everyday commercial short-haul urban transportation bike down the road.
Do you see commuting as being a huge focus moving forward? Do you see the commercial side of things? I think, especially being in the United States, I don't think we think about commercial sort of motorbikes all that much here. When I think about a commercial motorbike, I think maybe about a courier, and I think about like police bikes, but I don't immediately leap to a lot of other commercial bikes the way you would in many other parts of the world. So if you could talk a bit about where in the commercial space you see Cake sort of really engaging.
Without saying that Europe would be ahead, I think there's a bit of difference in terms of how cities have been built in Europe, but I think it's worthwhile applying that thinking to what's going on or what will happen, in the world, at large. And I'd say that I would, if we had this discussion 6 months ago, I would have said that on the short-haul urban transportation side of things, our customer would be a sustainability-oriented company, into urban transportation. Now, I'd say that unless that same company has a fossil-free solution for short-haul urban transportation within the next 24 months, they're going to be out of business. And that happens in conjunction with what used to be values and visions, until recently is now becoming lawmaking and regulations. We can see how cars, gasoline, and diesel is being banned in Europe. Paris being in the forefront. I just heard from the Netherlands 2 days ago that they're actually they're banning cars from the inner cities in 25 different municipalities. So again, whether it happens to the same, in the same pace in America or not, we will see. But just looking at New York and Manhattan, which is there are tons of carriers and couriers. They're using bicycles. And the increase in terms of motorized two-wheelers is extremely evident. And I'd say that not all American cities are perfect, but the denser cities like New York, while LA is a more scattered city, of course, might be less, adequate in terms of motorized two-wheelers and mopeds and motorcycles and so forth. But again, it's what we're seeing now is that we're hooking up, doing partnerships with truck companies, for instance, truck companies developing electric trucks. And what's happening there is that you'll be able to bring the goods with your truck to outside the city border, and then our bikes will be used as satellites to use that same truck as a local warehouse outside the city and do the urban transportation laps by using the bike, which is both efficient and, again, of course, it's a clean way of solving the matter, and it's also promoting or reducing the level of congestion, which is a huge issue everywhere pretty much. So I'm sure that you'll see, or we know that we have a number of pilots going on in the US as well. So I'm sure that not only us, but the number of similar kind of companies, brands, products will take a much larger, I'd say larger portion of that last mile transportation need.
See, I find that so interesting. The idea of taking a delivery truck and instead of taking your big delivery truck to every single place you need to go, plopping it down for the day in a good location and using it as a distribution hub and doing everything else with bikes. That is really interesting as someone who has to share the road with big trucks.
We have another project that just got going very recently, and that is, handyman and this is in the Netherlands, and they have a tough time finding parking spots, and they spend hours and hours and hours. And while it finally finds somewhere to park, it's not unusual to get a parking ticket, and the cost for that and the time being invested in trying to solve that is immense. So what they're doing now is that they're building hubs outside the cities. So the plumber or the electrician get there with a truck and then change means of transportation from the truck, which is being parked there with their tools, and then take one of our bikes, for instance, or someone else's to actually do their to whatever service they're meant to do that specific day, supporting again the efficiency, the aspects of sustainability, and solving a number of those issues that we're confronted with in urban traffic situations these days.
So is this where the impetus for the new work series comes from? I believe you unveiled the work series in November, I think.
Very, very much. I think that what we've done is that as a whole, the whole concept is a modular concept. So everything is deliberately built to be able to customize according to someone's specific need, whether, again, they'd be a plumber, electrician, carpenter, whatever it might be, or last mile food, pizza delivery or whatever it might be. So in that sense, everything, again, has the frame is actually structured to carry different things. And also due to the fact that we're not building, everything is kind of, without getting into to be too specific here, sorry, but due to the fact how the bikes have been developed, we can actually fit big batteries, large batteries. Not, again, getting back to the aspect of performance that I talked about before when it comes to reducing the number of battery cells. In this case, if we can promote power, reach, and efficiency by adding battery power, that's the case with these commercial bikes. So we extend reach far beyond what has been expected before. We have towing power, which is, you pull a car out from the side of the road with our bikes. So in that sense, it's really a game changer in terms of how these types of vessels can serve and increase efficiency and not at least profitability for the companies using these.
So, I mean, to eyes more accustomed to traditional motorcycles, a cake bike looks pretty weird, especially like the Ulsa series, which are probably my favorite. They look very unusual. And my understanding is that that's really, is the aesthetics of the bike really driven by that modularity and flexibility that you want them to have? Did you set out to create a design language, or did you set out, did the design language that has become what a cake looks like sort of grow out of what you wanted it to do? How did that process work for you?
I mean, I think that there's a benefit on our side to some extent. You know, if you'd be a motorcycling geek, you'd say the opposite. But due to the fact that we're not motorcycling, gasoline or petrol heads in that sense, we've had the ability to process the development of our bikes without being burdened by the backpack of history and culture and so forth, saying, oh, you can't do that, or you can do this, but not that, and so forth. So, establishing a typology, which is ours, has been important. So instead of, promoting the aspect of macho, roary, aggressive, excluding, complicated, and simply being distant, it's all about being inviting, including, easy to ride, crisp, new, fresh, clean, sustainable, and so forth. So it's a very deliberate design process. Then again, I'd say that there are different ways of achieving certain designs. And in our sense, functionality is a key thing, of course. So when we define aspects of performance, like this is the weight we want to achieve, this is the speeds, the torque, and all that, that has clear consequences in terms of how things actually come out in terms of geometry and sizing and kinematics and whatnot. But then I'd say that if you start looking closely on our bikes, there's a high level of precision. So every little radius here and there is really elaborated. So I wouldn't be here sitting, being arrogant about the fact that we don't care. It's only about functionality, and it is. But driving the kind of form and shapes and the appearance that we aspire for is very deliberate too.
Cake doesn't really consider itself a motorcycle company. It's my understanding is you think of yourself much more as an electric motorbike company. Where does that distinction sort of come in for you? Do you envision, I mean, like the Calk and is sort of getting into motorcycle territory in some ways, whereas many of the other bikes are much more electric motorbikes. Do you see trying to move more, expand into the motorcycle sphere? Or is that an area where you're like, look, there's enough development and competition in there. We have some niches that we're really focused on, and that's where we want to stay.
In general, we're speaking about light, quiet, and clean. We don't need to make any combustion engine motorbikes because we don't have a current customer base that we need to seduce. So we can leave that aside, which is, I'd say, an advantage if you want to be an electric. We also, experimenting with hydrogen and so forth, but, promoting aspects of sustainability. But in that sense, I'd say that do we continue developing bikes for off-road performance? Yes, we do. There's going to be additional bikes to make sure that we develop our own competence in terms of understanding how we can drive matters of performance and including torque and high speed and whatever it might be. Because again, that we can use in terms of making more relevant, user products, whether it be for commuters or for professional uses. But again, whether that is becoming more motorcycle or not, I don't know, because there are certain aspects that makes an off-road motorcycle somehow look the way it does, because there are certain performance aspects that you need to consider. We speak internally about the company that we're more Patagonia than Kawasaki, promoting the idea that it's the value-oriented aspects with an excellent, I'd say, functionality for the experience that the product has been intended for, which is crucial to us. So laying off everything that is again. Motorcycling traditional is deliberate. I would say though that it's really rewarding. I would describe it as when we first launched Cake as a first limited edition product at the Outdoor Retailer Show in Denver back in 2018. We went there because there were other outdoor brands there, addressing that same market. And I need to admit that I was potentially a little shy to address the motorcycling market because I felt like, they're just going to think that we're, stupid. But the rewarding aspect now is that we have more and more followers coming from the actual motorcycling space because they consider the product to be great. So that is something that we've been a little more, I'd say, confident in terms of what we bring to the market from a general perspective as time has passed.
When Nikki did her review of the Rivian R1T, there's a moment in that, the R1T being an electric off-road capable pickup truck, there's a moment in that in which she's going across a stream in the R1T and an external GoPro picks up the sound. It's just the sound of the burbling water. And I had multiple people say to me, if I could have that experience on an off-road motorcycle, not an off-road truck, people who do a lot of trail riding and stuff, that would be really, really revolutionary for me. And when I think about cake, that's definitely one of the things and markets that I really think about. For me, as someone who wants to commute and stuff, I think if I lived in a city, a cake might make a lot of sense for me as a commuter, but not being able to hop on the highway continues to be sort of a limiting factor for me. Is that something that you envision going? Is that a place you imagine going at some point, being able to have a bike that can hop on the highway? Or is that just so far into electric motorcycle territory as opposed to electric motorbike territory?
I would, and I don't really know myself where that border actually goes between them and us and so forth. So I'd say that top speed with our bikes, if you ride them in the most rapid and speedy modes, would be at about 100 k's per hour. So that should be around 60 k's, I guess, per hour, or 60 miles per hour. And of course, if you want to go super fast in that sense, to be able to follow the pace of highway riding. Is that something that we aspire to establish? No, I think that on our side, it is the short haul urban transportation need that we're supporting and that we can do, provide with excellence. That said, I think we're talking about, our sweet spot is between 0 and 30 miles pretty much. And that's urban inbound. So of course you should be able to get on the highway for a short, if you need to get from one place to another, spending a mile on the highway, you can do that today as well. But it's not going to be a touring experience in that sense. So I think we need to be sober about where we actually make, super sense, and where it's like and who knows, maybe battery technology or hydrogen or other will solve that topic in a number of years from now in a good way, where you can actually think about crossing the United States on an electric motorbike, easily. But that's again not on our map as of now.
On the total opposite side of that, have you considered, or have you ever looked into doing a pedal electric hybrid with a cake bike? Because I look at some of your smaller bikes and I imagine like slapping some pedals on that.
I'd say that we had I told myself 3 years ago that we're never going to make a bike that has pedals. And I'm a bicyclist, so I love, bicycles. So it's not that. But I think that just to be strategically, clear about what and what not, that was my decision. But due to regulations now, we're making a next generation that has pedals. And the reason for that is just because the different regulations, lawmaking in different geographies and markets. So, for instance, in New York, to be able to park a two-wheel motorized vehicle on the sidewalk, it needs to have pedals. So for us to be able to address UPS and DHL and whatever it might be on the work side of things for commercial uses, we need to have one of those that has pedals. So, I mean, again, what are we doing here? Well, we're just adapting to what the lawmaking says locally in New York. So that's how the different stories behind different decisions, and you end up doing stuff that you didn't believe you were going to do in the first place.
So before we wrap, because I've taken a lot of your time already, I'm really curious, when you look at the market, who do you see as And not necessarily even company-wise, but like what companies or what products, where do you see the competition for you? Because it feels like in some ways you're trying to open up some new space where you're sort of saying like, we are a solution you may not have thought of. So are there also companies that you look at that you say like, oh, that product or that company, that edges into what we're trying to do?
Without being cocky, I'm very humble about the fact that there's going to be tons of competition going forward, because there's no other way forward than what will happen everywhere is that, it's happening in America too, the electric highway in California, meaning that bring your car, but you need to park it next to the highway. And how to get from the highway into town and do your errands, it's perfect if you can bring a bike that you roll off from the back of your car and then get back again. So it will happen everywhere. Are we going to be alone? Of course not. We just happen to gain a little, speed in the beginning. I think that we might be somewhere between 12 and 24 months ahead. But what we're going to do is that we're going to stick to our obligation of promoting sustainability the way we define it by extending life cycles. And we're doing a number of initiatives, which is Recake. We do cake as a service. That said, will there be other companies doing similar initiatives in terms of product? Yes, there will be. But this is why I love running a business, because competition is necessary for us to be able to improve, to actually cater for a high level of purpose for our users, and in regards to the planet as a whole and the needs that are related to that. So again, right now, I think that we have competitors on different sides of how we have mapped our position. But it's also interesting, not coming from the motorcycling industry. I think that we're cutting the cake a bit differently than everyone else, which is basically not doing a line of product like if you had been a motorcycling company or a moped company or so forth. So I think that said, are we going to be the only ones doing exactly that? No, of course not. So competition is good. I'm looking forward. We have a wonderful start. I mean, we're in a position where we define ourselves as a relatively successful global startup with focus in North America and Europe, growing our business, becoming a vehicle industry. That's our path going forward. And with additional, competition coming along down the road.
Is there anything we should look out for in particular from Cake in the next sort of coming year?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many things going on. I think that in general, we have been generously funded to be able to actually implement our plans at pretty high pace, meaning that there'll be a number of new platforms coming out. We have learned a lot. We've been able to, add on functionality and performance beyond what we believe we could do, previously. We're opening Cake sites for showroom retail service and test riding in a number of cities around the world. We just signed LA the other day. We're looking to do the same thing in New York, potentially Denver and Austin this year, or San Francisco, we'll see. Same thing in Europe, Paris, London, Barcelona, and so forth. So there is, a number of things happening, both in terms of actual product, together with building the ecosystem around us to be able to invite, professionals and customers who are, in the passage of figuring what the future mean of transportation is going to be. And I think that everyone who's sustainability oriented, promoting aspect of respect and responsibility through COVID and everything now, might leave their cars to a large extent and thinking about whether they should, ride the bike or use one of our products, or potentially change their automotive behavior by going by bus or whatever it might be. So again, the transformation is happening, and it's exciting, and there'll be high speed on our side trying to nothing is guaranteed, but we have a plan, and if we play it well, we'll continue to develop and make sense, hopefully, to the market.
Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. And I know it's pretty late where you are right now.
Of course.
I'm super excited to see where you go next. And everyone at the channel can't wait to get behind the handlebars of a cake bike. Thank you again, Stefan, and have a great rest of your evening.
Thank you.
So that's it for today. If you liked the video, be sure to give it a thumbs up, and don't forget to leave your thoughts below or in our free to join Discord chat room. There's a link in the video description. If you haven't already, make sure you subscribe to this channel and our other channel, Transfervolve Take 2, and give the bell a gentle ding to make sure you're told when our next video goes live. Thanks on behalf of the entire T crew go out to the folk on my right for being our $15 to $49 a month Patreon supporters. Special thanks to our $50 a month patrons, Chris Maxwell, Brian Newton, Dave Kitchen, Michael Goad, Ricky Leung, Andrew Martin, Guido Drahata, Brophy Wolf, Tashlin Legong, Gordon C., Stephen O'Donoghue, Kyle Hodson, Anthony Coates, Regine Fellows, Rory Litwin, Anonymous Freak, Jim Burness, and Denny Hyde. And our deepest gratitude to our $100 a month Patreon supporters, Marcel Wards, Reggie Watts, Joe Bresney, JP Fagerback, Will Graylin, Matthew Drobnak, John Lyons, Christopher Lee Jones, Laura Reynolds, Paul Conway, Ellery Hensley, and Ian. Feeling left out? You can join Patreon at the link below, hit the join button to show support on YouTube, or show support through Bitcoin, Ko-fi, or a cool swag store. Thanks for joining me, and as always, keep evolving!